Hello there, and welcome back. Tonight, we are sailing into the remarkable world of pirates. Stay with me, because by the end of tonight's journey, you'll never look at a pirate flag, a wooden ship, or a quiet harbor the same way again. Not the simple legends we often inherit, but the real lives behind them. This was a world shaped by risk, discipline, ambition, and fear. Pirates were not only sea raiders, they were part of a wider history of empire and trade. Their ships moved through a dangerous age, where fortune could change in a single encounter. Some crews followed written rules. Some challenged powerful governments. Some became feared across oceans without winning every fight. What makes this story so fascinating is how much it surprises us. The truth is often stranger than the myth. Behind the flags and rumors were people making hard choices in a harsh world. Their history is full of courage, cruelty, strategy, and survival. If you enjoy these gentle journeys, I invite you to like, subscribe, or share a thought below. It helps others find their way here, too. One sleepy soul at a time. But for now, all you need to do is settle in. Let your shoulders soften. Allow your breathing to slow. And as the day begins to fade away, join me as we explore this hidden world of pirates together. Let's begin. Many pirates were former sailors escaping brutal conditions at sea. To understand why men turn pirate, it helps to imagine the life they often left behind. Merchant ships' naval vessels could be harsh worlds of low pay, spoiled food, disease, cramped quarters, and relentless discipline. In some navies, impressment forced men into service against their will. Punishments could be severe, and captains might hold frightening authority over every hour of a sailor's life. A voyage could last months or years with little comfort and no guarantee of wages at the end. Piracy offered danger, but it also offered a different bargain. A sailor might receive a share of plunder instead of a fixed wage. He might vote on important matters. He might escape a captain who treated him as disposable. This does not make piracy noble. Pirates harmed many people, but it does explain why the choice could appear tempting. For some seamen, the pirate ship was not a descent into chaos. It was a desperate search for agency. Walking the plank was far rarer than books and films suggest. The famous plank belongs much more to popular imagination than to everyday pirate practice. Real pirates had no shortage of cruel punishments, but forcing captives to step from aboard into the sea was not a common feature of recorded pirate life. The image became powerful later because it was simple, dramatic, and easy to picture. It gave storytellers a perfect scene of suspense with a victim above the water and a crew watching in menace. Historical pirates were usually more practical. They wanted information, cooperation, ransom, labor, or cargo. A captive might be threatened, beaten, marooned, or killed. But elaborate theater was not always useful. Time mattered during raids, and lingering too long near a captured vessel increased danger. This is one reason pirate history can surprise us. Some famous details are late inventions or rare exceptions. The true record is often less theatrical, but in many ways more disturbing because it shows piracy as work done under pressure, rather than stage drama. Pirate flags were designed to frighten enemies into surrendering quickly. A flag was a message sent before voices could carry across the water. When a pirate vessel raised a dark signal marked with deathly symbols, it was not only decoration. It was psychological warfare. The goal was often to make resistance feel pointless. If a merchant crew surrendered quickly, the pirates could board, search, take what they wanted, and leave before naval help appeared. Fighting risked shattered masts, torn sails, ruined cargo, injuries, and death. A frightening flag could protect the prize by ending the battle before it began. Different crews used different designs, and not every flag matched the familiar skull and crossbones. The symbols were chosen because they were easy to understand in an instant. Death, danger, and urgency needed no translation. A small piece of cloth could carry a reputation built across oceans. In that sense, the flag was part of the weapon system, as important to a pirate's success as speed, surprise, and firepower. Pirates often ran their ships with surprisingly democratic rules. Life aboard a pirate vessel was not the wild disorder people often imagine. Before a voyage began, many crews agreed to written articles that set out who received what share, what behavior was forbidden, and how disputes would be handled. These rules mattered because a pirate ship depended on cooperation under extreme pressure. A captain could not simply behave like a king at sea. In many crews, He held special authority during a chase or battle. But ordinary decisions could be debated by the men who risked their lives beside him. This made piracy unusual in a world where most sailors lived under harsh naval discipline or merchant captains with near-total power. Some pirate crews voted on leadership, punishment, destination, and division of plunder. It was not modern democracy, and it was still violent and unequal in many ways. Yet for desperate sailors in a brutal age, it could feel astonishingly different from the rigid world they had escaped. Blackbeard built his terrifying reputation with smoke, fuses, and theatre. Edward Teach understood that fear could be as powerful as cannon fire. When he prepared for battle, he reportedly tucked slow-burning matches beneath his hat and around his face. These smoking cords created a strange and frightening effect, making him appear almost supernatural as he moved through the haze. His beard was already dramatic, thick, dark, and carefully cultivated as part of his image. But the performance was not random vanity. It was strategy. A merchant crew that believed it faced a merciless monster might surrender before a fight began. That saved lives on both sides, and it protected valuable cargo from being damaged. Blackbeard commanded through reputation as much as force. He let stories travel ahead of him, growing larger with every frightened witness. In an age when news moved through ports by rumor, he became a living warning. His greatest weapon may not have been his sword. It may have been the terror people imagined before he arrived. Pirates signed written articles before sailing together. Before some crew set out, they agreed to a written code that acted like a contract for the voyage. These articles could define shares of plunder, compensation for wounds, punishments for theft, and expectations during combat. They also helped prevent arguments from destroying the crew once wealth appeared. That mattered because pirates lived in cramped conditions where resentment could become deadly. A clear agreement gave everyone a reference point. It told a new recruit what he owed the company and what the company owed him. The articles were usually practical rather than grand. They dealt with food, weapons, discipline, lights, quarrels, and money. Yet their existence is remarkable. Many pirates were men who had known arbitrary command aboard merchant or naval ships. By setting terms in writing, they created a rough framework of consent inside an illegal world. The paper did not make them gentle. It made them organized. Their survival depended not just on daring, but on rules they could enforce among themselves. Pirate captains could be voted out by their own crews. On many pirate ships, leadership depended on continued approval. A captain who seemed cowardly, greedy, reckless, or unlucky could lose command if enough crew members turned against him. This was a sharp contrast with naval life, where rank came from hierarchy and official authority. Pirate command was more conditional. During battle or pursuit, the captain's judgment mattered enormously, and crews often gave him strong authority in those moments. Outside those crises, however, he could be challenged. This arrangement helped prevent one person from turning the vessel into a private dictatorship. It also reflected the crew's investment in the voyage. Each man risked death and expected a voice in choices that could decide his fate. Voting out a captain was not a polite parliamentary exercise. It could be tense, dangerous, and shaped by factions. Still, the possibility mattered. It meant a pirate leader had to perform. He needed courage, skill, reputation, and results. Without those, command could vanish as quickly as a prize on the horizon. Some pirate crews offered injured sailors one of history's earliest insurance systems. A pirate voyage could leave a person maimed in seconds. Cannon splinters, falling rigging, infection, and boarding fights could end a sailor's working lifelong before old age. Because of that danger, some crews agreed in advance to compensate wounded members from the common plunder. A lost arm, a lost leg, or a damaged eye might be assigned a particular payment before any prize was taken. This was not kindness in the soft sense. It was practical fairness among people who knew the risks were shared. The arrangement encouraged sailors to fight without fearing total abandonment afterward. It also revealed how carefully some crews thought about survival. A man who had given his strength to the company was owed something if his body paid the price. In the wider maritime world, injured sailors were often discarded with little support. A pirate crew could be ruthless to outsiders, yet internally it sometimes created a harsh but recognizable system of mutual protection. Pirates divided loot by shares rather than simple chaos. After a successful capture, plunder had to be distributed in a way the crew accepted. Many pirate groups used a share system that assigned different portions according to role and responsibility. Ordinary sailors might receive one share. Skilled officers, surgeons, carpenters, captains, or quartermasters might receive larger amounts. This system helped prevent the strongest men from grabbing everything and tearing the crew apart. It also made recruitment easier. A sailor considering piracy wanted to know what he might gain if a voyage succeeded. The share system turned risk into expectation. It gave the crew a reason to keep fighting together after the first prize was taken. Sorting loot could be complicated because cargo came in many forms. Coins were easy to divide, but cloth, food, weapons, or trade goods required valuation or sale. Disputes still happened, of course. Greed did not disappear because rules existed. Yet the structure reveals something essential. Pirate ships were criminal enterprises, but they were enterprises all the same. And enterprises need accounting. Skilled carpenters were among the most valuable people on pirate ships. A pirate vessel survived by speed, surprise, and seaworthiness. And all of those depended on constant repair. Wood swelled, cracked, rotted, and splintered. Masts strained under heavy canvas. Hulls leaked after storms or gunfire. A carpenter knew how to keep the ship alive when there was no dockyard nearby. He could patch damage, shape replacement parts, examine captured vessels, and judge whether a prize was worth keeping. In a crisis, his work could decide whether the crew escaped or sank. Pirates often operated far from friendly ports, so technical skill became a kind of power. A good carpenter was not merely a laborer. He was a guardian of the ship's body. His tools could turn wreckage into survival and a damaged prize into a new pirate vessel. This made recruitment and after captures. People often picture pirates by their weapons, but the less glamorous tools mattered just as much. A saw, an adze, and steady hands could save everyone aboard. Pirates hunted ships across trade routes, not random open water. Successful piracy depended on prediction. The ocean was immense, and a ship wandering without a plan could waste precious food and water while finding nothing. Pirates studied the routes used by merchant vessels because trade moved along patterns. Winds, currents, colonial ports, seasonal schedules, and imperial routes shaped where valuable ships were likely to appear. A pirate crew wanted busy sea lanes, narrow passages, harbor approaches, and places where ships slowed or gathered. This made piracy less like aimless roaming and more like calculated hunting. Information was vital. Captured papers might reveal destinations. Prisoners might describe convoys. Taverns could provide rumors about sailings. Pirates who understood commercial movement could wait where opportunity was most likely. They were predators of the maritime economy, and the economy had habits. This is why geography mattered so much. The right island, cape, or channel could become a trap. Out on empty water, a pirate was only a sailor with a dangerous flag. Near trade, he became a threat. The Caribbean became a pirate hotspot because empire created opportunity. The Caribbean was not naturally destined to be a pirate world. It became one because European empires turned it into a crowded theater of wealth, rivalry, and shipping. Spanish treasure routes, plantation economies, colonial ports, and wartime privateering all helped create openings for sea raiders. Islands sat near major passages and authority was uneven. A ship could attack in one zone, sell goods in another, and hide where officials were weak or willing to look away. The region's geography also helped. Channels, reefs, coves, and scattered settlements gave small, fast vessels places to vanish. Imperial competition made the situation even messier. One colony might condemn a raider while another quietly benefited from his stolen cargo. Pirates exploited those contradictions. They were not outside history. They were produced by it. The same empires that wanted secure trade also created violent sailors, valuable cargoes, and legal gray areas. In the Caribbean, power moved by ship. And that meant power could be intercepted. Nassau once operated like an unofficial pirate republic. For a time, the settlement on New Providence became one of the most notorious pirate havens in the Atlantic world. Its harbor offered shelter, access to shipping lanes, and distance from firm imperial control. Pirates gathered there because it provided something almost as important as plunder. It offered community. Crews could repair vessels, trade goods, recruit sailors, share news, and enjoy the profits of raiding. The phrase pirate republic can be misleading if it suggests a stable government with noble ideals. Nassau was rough, opportunistic, and dangerous. Yet it did become a place where pirates acted with unusual confidence. Famous figures passed through or operated nearby, and the settlement's reputation grew until it became a direct challenge to imperial order. Authorities eventually moved to suppress it through pardons and force. That crackdown matters because it shows how serious Nassau had become. It was not merely a hideout. It was a base where outlaw sailors briefly made a society around their own interests. Port Royal grew rich by welcoming pirates and privateers. In 17th century Jamaica, Port Royal became a place where sea raiders could turn violence into wealth on land. Its location made it valuable, and its appetite for trade made it useful to privateers and pirates who brought in captured goods. Taverns, merchants, officials, and tradesmen all benefited when prizes entered the harbor. Money spent quickly in port could enrich a town almost overnight. This created a complicated relationship between respectability and crime. A raider who harmed enemy shipping might be treated as a useful ally when his plunder fed the local economy. Goods taken at sea could become merchandise on shore with surprising speed. Port Royal gained a reputation for excess, but behind the stories was a clear economic truth. Colonial settlements often needed supplies, coin, and protection. Sea raiders could provide all three, at least when their targets suited local interests. The town's rise shows how piracy survived through land connections. A pirate ship needed a harbor as surely as it needed wind. But before we drift further, here's one fact worth staying awake for a little longer. The most successful pirate in history was not a man with a black flag and a cutlass. It was a woman from China. Ching Shih commanded a pirate confederation so large that many better-known Atlantic pirates seemed small beside her. After the death of her husband, she helped control a vast fleet in the South China Sea during the early 19th century. Her power did not come from legend alone. It rested on organization, negotiation, discipline, and a deep understanding of coastal trade. Under her influence, pirate squadrons operated with rules that regulated plunder and punished theft from the shared treasury. She faced imperial forces, rival fleets, and changing political pressure, yet she survived in a way few famous pirates did. Instead of ending at the gallows, she negotiated an extraordinary surrender that allowed many followers to avoid execution. She kept wealth and lived on for years afterward. Her story overturns the familiar image of piracy as a mostly Caribbean drama led by bearded men. The greatest success story in pirate history belongs to a woman who mastered power on a staggering scale. Pirate treasure was usually food, medicine, cloth, tools, and money. The glittering chest buried beneath a palm tree is one of the strongest pirate images, but the real prizes were often far more practical. A ship at sea needed supplies constantly. Flour, salted meat, fresh water, rope, canvas, medicines, nails, navigational instruments, and spare timber could be just as valuable as coins. Cloth mattered because clothing wore out fast in salt air and hard labor. Tools mattered because a damaged ship could become a floating trap. Even humble cargo could be sold, traded, or used to keep the crew alive. Pirates were not usually hunting romance. They were hunting usefulness. A captured merchant vessel might carry sugar, tobacco, spices, dye, or manufactured goods that could be converted into profit through coastal networks. Money was welcome, of course, but survival came first. The most revealing thing about pirate treasure is how ordinary it often was. The dream was gold, but the daily reality was bread, rope, water, and a ship that still floated. Captured pirates sometimes became legal privateers with royal permission. The difference between piracy and lawful raiding could be a piece of paper. Governments issued documents called letters of marque that allowed private ships to attack enemy vessels during war. These privateers could make fortunes while claiming they served a crown or state. The system was tempting for rulers because it expanded naval pressure without paying for a full fleet. It was tempting for sailors because it made violence profitable and sometimes respectable. But the boundary was unstable. A man condemned as a pirate by one power might be treated as useful by another. Some sea raiders moved between legality and outlawry depending on politics, paperwork, and timing. When war ended, privateers could suddenly lose their lawful targets. A crew trained in raiding might then continue without permission. This made the oceans morally tangled. The same attack could be called service, crime, or heroism, depending on who wrote the record. At sea, Law often followed power as closely as justice. The golden age of piracy lasted only a few dramatic decades. The most famous era of Atlantic piracy was brief compared with its enormous cultural afterlife. Roughly from the late 17th century into the early 18th century, conditions aligned in a way that allowed pirates to flourish. European empires moved wealth across the seas. Wars trained large numbers of sailors in violence and navigation. Peace then left many of them unemployed. Colonial ports were scattered, naval patrols were imperfect, and trade routes carried tempting cargo through vulnerable waters. For a short time, pirate crews could exploit the gaps between empires. They struck quickly, sold goods through murky networks, and retreated to places where authority was weak. But the window narrowed. Governments strengthened naval campaigns, offered pardons, pressured governors, and made public examples of captured crews. The era burned brightly because it was unstable from the start. Its fame comes partly from compression. In only a handful of decades, it produced figures, myths, trials, flags, and stories that still shape how we imagine piracy today. Quartermasters often held more daily power than pirate captains. The quartermaster was one of the most important officers aboard many pirate vessels. While the captain directed major action during a chase or fight, the quartermaster often managed the crew's interests during ordinary shipboard life. He might oversee the division of plunder, settle disputes, inspect supplies, and represent the sailors against overreach from the captain. This made him a counterweight inside the command structure. His authority reflected a central pirate concern. The crew wanted leadership, but it also wanted protection from domination. A trusted quartermaster could help keep the company together by making sure shares were measured fairly and complaints were heard before they became mutiny. In some cases, he controlled access to captured goods and supervised boarding parties. That gave him real influence over wealth and discipline. The role shows how pirate ships were not simply ruled by the loudest or most violent person. They developed officers that balanced ambition with suspicion. Power aboard ship was divided because everyone knew power could be abused. Henry Morgan became a knight after raiding Spanish possessions. Henry Morgan's career shows how strange the politics of sea raiding could be. To Spain, he was a destructive enemy who attacked valuable colonial targets. To England, he could be presented as a bold servant of national interest. His expeditions against Spanish holdings brought wealth and attention, and his name became tied to daring assaults in the Caribbean. The most astonishing part is what followed. Rather than being remembered only as an outlaw, Morgan was later knighted and became Lieutenant Governor of Jamaica. That transformation was possible because legality depended heavily on imperial perspective. Violence that looked like piracy to one side could look like patriotic service to another. Morgan's life did not fit neatly into the simple category of pirate villain. He moved through a world where crowns, colonies, and private profit overlapped. His rise into official status reveals the uncomfortable closeness between empire and raiding. The same skills that made a man feared at sea could make him useful in government. Some pirates began as privateers during wartime. A wartime privateer did not always look very different from a pirate. He sailed an armed vessel, chased merchant ships, took cargo by force, and hoped to profit from violence at sea. The difference was permission. A government could authorize private ships to attack enemy commerce, and that commission gave raiding a legal mask. For many sailors, this was a training ground. They learned how to close with a prize, intimidate a crew, search cargo, and escape before a larger warship arrived. They also learned that the ocean could make a poor man rich if he was bold enough. When the war ended, the habits remained. A person who had spent years raiding under a flag might not easily return to slow wages and strict command. Some crossed the line because the skills were already there. Piracy did not always begin with a sudden leap into crime. Sometimes it began as official violence, then drifted beyond control. Peace treaties suddenly turned many privateers into unemployed sea raiders. A treaty signed in Europe could change a sailor's life on the far side of the ocean. During war, privateering created work for thousands of men who knew how to fight at sea. They had weapons, experience, crews, and a taste for prize money. Then peace arrived, and the legal targets disappeared almost overnight. Governments no longer wanted uncontrolled violence against former enemies. Merchants wanted stable routes again. Private vessels that had once been useful became inconvenient. For the sailors aboard them, the change could be devastating. Their wages ended, their prospects shrank, and their knowledge had few peaceful uses. Some accepted ordinary work again. Others kept doing what they already knew, only without permission. This is one reason piracy surged after major conflict. The ocean was full of trained raiders who had learned to live by capture. Peace made governments safer in theory, but for many discharged seamen, it created a dangerous emptiness, and piracy rushed in to fill it. Pirate crews often included sailors from many countries and backgrounds. A pirate ship could gather people who might never have stood together on land. Englishmen, Dutchmen, Frenchmen, Africans, Irishmen, Spaniards, and sailors from the Americas could all find themselves aboard the same vessel. The sea created strange communities because ships needed hands more than pedigrees. A crew cared about whether a person could haul a line, steer, fight, repair, cook, or navigate. Language barriers still mattered and prejudice did not vanish at sea. Yet the practical demands of survival could force cooperation across boundaries that empires tried to keep firm. Captured sailors sometimes joined voluntarily. Others were pressured. Some stayed because the alternative was poverty, punishment, or return to brutal service. This mixed world made pirate crews unpredictable to colonial authorities. They were not simply one nation's criminals. They were fragments of the maritime world gathered into a moving outlaw society. Their diversity came from the routes they attacked, the ports they visited, and the harsh choices sailors faced everywhere. Some escaped enslaved Africans found freedom aboard pirate ships. For enslaved people in the Atlantic world, the sea could be a place of terror, but it could also become a path out of bondage. Some Africans and people of African descent joined pirate crews after escaping plantations, coastal settlements, or ships. Their reasons varied, yet the possibility was powerful. A pirate vessel offered danger and uncertainty, but it might also offer weapons, movement, pay, and a degree of status denied on land. Some black sailors became skilled members of crews and a few appear in records as active fighters, rather than passive passengers. This does not make pirates liberators as a group. Some participated in the slave economy, and many acted from greed rather than principle. Still, piracy sometimes opened a crack in a brutal system. For a person hunted by law and empire, that crack could matter enormously. A ship beyond easy reach of colonial authority might become a harsh refuge. My freedom was fragile, but real enough to risk everything. Pirate life was dangerous, but merchant service could be worse. It seems strange that anyone would choose piracy until the alternatives come into focus. Merchant sailors often endured cramped quarters, rotten provisions, delayed wages, and captains who could drive them brutally for months. A man might cross dangerous waters, survive storms, and return home with little money to show for it. If the shipowner cheated him, justice could be distant or impossible. Naval service could be harsher still, especially for those forced aboard. Against that background, a pirate crew could seem less like madness and more like a gamble. The risks were enormous. Capture might mean trial and hanging. Injury could end everything. Yet the rewards were immediate, and the crew share system gave ordinary sailors a stake in success. This is the unsettling truth. Piracy was not attractive because it was safe. It was attractive because respectable maritime work could be punishing, uncertain, and deeply unfair. For some men, the outlaw ship looked like the lesser danger. Many pirates could not swim despite living at sea. The idea sounds absurd at first. People who spent their lives on ships were often helpless in the water. Yet, swimming was not a universal skill among sailors in earlier centuries. Many learned seamanship from hard labor, not leisure. There were no swimming lessons aboard a crowded merchant vessel, and falling overboard in rough weather was often fatal whether a person could swim or not. Heavy clothing, cold water, strong currents, and a moving ship could defeat even a capable swimmer. Some sailors may also have avoided learning because survival after falling into the sea seemed unlikely. The ship was safety. The water was not a playground, but a vast and indifferent hazard. This added deeper tension to pirate life. Every chase, storm, boarding action, and repair near the hull took place above a world that could swallow a person instantly. The men who ruled decks and rigging often lived only a few feet from a danger they could not master. Pirates preferred fast ships over huge warships. Power at sea was not only about size. A massive vessel with many guns could dominate in a formal battle, but pirates usually wanted something different. They needed to catch merchant ships, escape naval patrols, slip into shallow waters, and move before news spread. A smaller, Faster vessel could be more useful than a floating fortress. Speed let pirates choose when to attack and when to vanish. It also allowed them to chase prizes that a heavier ship might lose. A huge warship required a larger crew, deeper water, more supplies, and more maintenance. That could become a burden for outlaws who lived by mobility. Pirates often modified captured vessels to improve performance. They cleared decks, added guns where useful, and kept hulls as efficient as possible. Their ideal ship was not the most impressive from a distance. It was the one that could appear suddenly, close quickly, and disappear before authority caught up. In piracy, agility could be survival. Shallow draft vessels helped pirates hide near coasts and islands. A ship's draft is the depth of water it needs beneath the towel. For pirates, a shallow draft could be a remarkable advantage. It allowed a vessel to move where larger ships hesitated, especially near reefs, sandbars, mangrove channels, river mouths, and island coves. These places could become hiding grounds, repair sites, or escape routes. A pursuing naval ship with a deeper hull might be forced to stop while the pirate vessel slipped into water too thin to follow. This changed the geography of danger. A coastline was not just a border between land and sea. It was a maze of opportunities for anyone who knew how to read it. Local knowledge mattered greatly. A crew familiar with tides and hidden passages could make a small ship feel almost invisible. Shallow water also brought risk, since one mistake could ground the vessel. But for skilled raiders, that risk was worth it. The coast itself could become a shield. Sloops were prized because they were quick and easy to handle. Among the vessels pirates favored, the sloop had a special appeal. It was usually small enough to operate with a modest crew, yet fast enough to chase many merchant ships. Its rigging made it responsive, which mattered during sudden turns, coastal approaches, and escapes from stronger enemies. A pirate crew did not always have hundreds of trained men available. It needed a vessel that could be worked efficiently by the people aboard. Sloops answered that need. They could dart through the Caribbean's island passages, approach targets quickly, and withdraw before a heavy warship could bring full force to bear. They also required fewer supplies than larger vessels, which made long outlaw cruising more practical. The sloop's strength was not grandeur. It was usefulness. It matched the rhythm of piracy, where speed, supplies, and flexibility often mattered more than overwhelming firepower. To a pirate crew, a good sloop was not a small ship. It was a sharp instrument. Pirates often captured ships without firing a single cannon. A successful raid did not always begin with thunder. Sometimes it began with recognition. A merchant crew saw a suspicious vessel gaining fast, noticed its armed men, understood the danger, and decided resistance was hopeless. Pirates preferred that outcome when possible. Cannon fire could tear sails, smash cargo, kill useful prisoners, and damage the very prize they hoped to take. It also made noise and smoke that could attract attention. Intimidation was cleaner. The pirates might show weapons, raise a threatening flag, fire a warning shot, or simply crowd the decks to display numbers. If the target surrendered, the boarding could proceed with frightening efficiency. The attackers searched papers, questioned officers, selected goods, and moved on. This kind of capture reveals piracy as a calculated business of pressure. Violence remained close, and the threat was real. But the smartest crews did not always want battle. They wanted control. The best victory was the one that delivered a ship intact and left time to escape. A terrifying reputation could save ammunition and preserve stolen cargo. Reputation traveled faster than many ships. Sailors carried stories from port to port, and those stories could turn a pirate's name into a weapon. If a crew believed a particular raider punished resistance, they might surrender sooner. That meant fewer shots fired, fewer wounded men, and less damage to cargo that could later be sold or used. Powder and shot were not limitless, and replacing them was not always easy. A pirate who could win through fear conserved resources. Reputation also shaped negotiations. Captains might hand over valuables quickly if they thought defiance would bring harsher treatment. Some pirates cultivated this deliberately. They understood that rumor could do work before they arrived. But reputation was dangerous to manage. Too much cruelty could bring stronger pursuit from authorities. Too little menace could invite resistance. The most effective image balanced terror with predictability. A target had to believe surrender would be safer than fighting. In that narrow space, fear became a practical tool. Pirate ships carried surgeons, though medical care remained painfully limited. A surgeon aboard a pirate vessel was valuable, but his world was harsh. He worked without modern anesthesia, antibiotics, blood transfusions, or clean operating rooms. His tools could be knives, saws, probes, bandages, needles, and bottles of harsh spirits. He treated wounds from splinters, blades, bullets, falls, burns, and disease. Infection was a constant danger because ships were damp, crowded, and difficult to keep clean. Even a small wound could turn deadly if it festered. Still, a surgeon could make the difference between life and death. He could remove damaged tissue, set broken bones, stitch cuts, drain abscesses, and advise on diet when sickness spread. Pirates sometimes forced captured medical men to join them because trained practitioners were scarce at sea. The presence of a surgeon shows the practical side of piracy. These crews expected injuries and planned for them. Yet, the care available was frightening by modern standards. Survival often depended on endurance, luck, and the surgeon's steady hands. Amputation at sea was often faster than infection. When a limb was shattered by shot or crushed by wreckage, delay could kill. At sea, a badly damaged arm or leg might become a source of unstoppable infection. A surgeon facing that reality sometimes chose amputation as the only chance of survival. The procedure had to be swift because pain, blood loss, and shock were overwhelming dangers. Assistants held the patient down. A tourniquet slowed bleeding. The surgeon cut through flesh, sawed through bone, tied vessels, and dressed the stump as best he could. It was brutal, but not senseless. In a world before antibiotics, removing ruined tissue could be the difference between a living patient and a spreading fever. Pirates understood this risk because battle injuries were part of their trade. Compensation systems sometimes recognized the loss because everyone knew the price a body could pay. Amputation also explains why maritime disability became so visible in later stories. The sea did not only test courage. It permanently marked those who survived it. Pirates used stolen medicines as valuable trade goods. Medicine at sea was precious because illness could ruin a voyage as surely as a storm. Captured ships might carry ointments, purges, tinctures, instruments, bandages, herbs, and imported remedies that pirates could use or sell. Some treatments were ineffective by modern standards, and others were dangerous, but they still held value in the world of early maritime medicine. A bottle that promised relief from fever or pain could be worth stealing. So could a chest belonging to a ship surgeon. Pirates operated in places where formal supply chains were uncertain. A stolen medical store could help keep a crew functional after injury or sickness. It could also be traded through coastal contacts for food, repairs, ammunition, or cash. This reminds us that pirates did not only seek spectacular riches. They understood the market value of practical goods. In the cramped world of a ship, health was a form of wealth. A medicine chest might not glitter, but it could keep men alive long enough to capture the next prize. Freshwater was one of the most important prizes. A ship could be surrounded by water and still face thirst. Seawater was useless for drinking, and stored freshwater spoiled, leaked, or ran low during long voyages. Casks could grow foul. Heat could make supplies unpleasant and unsafe. Every crew had to think constantly about where the next drinkable water would come from. For pirates, capturing water could be as important as taking coins. A prize vessel with full casks offered immediate survival. The coastal spring or island watering place could become strategically important, especially if naval patrols watched common harbors. Without enough water, strength failed quickly. Men became weak, confused, and desperate. Plans for raiding collapsed into the basic need to stay alive. This is why piracy was never just a chain of dramatic battles. Much of it was logistics. The most fearsome crew still depended on barrels, rain, wells, and careful rationing. Freshwater was not glamorous treasure, but at sea, it was life itself. Spoiled food could weaken a crew before any battle began. Long voyages turned eating into a test of endurance. Food stored aboard ship had to survive heat, damp, insects, rats, salt air, and time. Biscuits could fill with weevils. Meat could become rancid. Cheese could harden or rot. When provisions failed, a crew's strength declined before any enemy appeared. Hunger made men slower on ropes, weaker at pumps, and less steady in combat. Illness spread more easily when bodies were poorly fed. Pirates relied on captured supplies partly because their own stores were always under threat from decay. A prize carrying edible food could refresh the crew and extend a voyage. A prize carrying spoiled cargo might be almost useless. The problem also shaped decisions. A hungry crew might take greater risks. A well-stocked crew could wait for better targets. Food was strategy because bodies were the engine of the ship. Every sail raised, every cannon loaded, and every boarding attempt depended on men strong enough to move. Citrus fruits helped protect sailors from scurvy. Scurvy was one of the great terrors of long-distance sailing. It came from lack of vitamin C, though sailors did not understand the chemistry for much of the age of sail. They knew the effects instead. Gums swelled, teeth loosened, old wounds reopened, skin bruised, and strength faded. A crew could be crippled without a single shot fired. Fresh citrus fruit helped because it restored what preserved shipboard diets lacked. Lemons, limes, and oranges could become life-saving cargo, especially after long weeks on salted meat and hard biscuit. Pirates who captured fresh produce were not merely enjoying a luxury. They were seizing protection against a disease that haunted the oceans. The tragedy is that the remedy was known unevenly before it became standard practice. Some voyagers carried helpful foods. Others did not. For a pirate crew, a crate of fruit might mean faster recovery, stronger hands, and better chances in the next chase. Bright flavor carried serious power. Pirates captured navigation tools because survival depended on finding routes. At sea, not knowing where you were could become fatal. A pirate crew needed instruments to judge position, distance, direction, and time as accurately as possible. Compasses, charts, crossstaffs, backstaffs, quadrants, and later improved devices could help sailors turn a blank horizon into usable knowledge. These tools were valuable prizes because they extended freedom. A crew that could navigate well could choose hunting grounds, avoid hazards, locate islands, and escape pursuers. A crew that could not might drift into reefs, miss watering places, or wander until supplies failed. Captured instruments also carried information from the wider maritime world. A chart marked by another sailor might reveal shoals, channels, anchorages, and routes used by merchant traffic. Pirates depended on such knowledge because the sea punished ignorance quickly. The romance of piracy often focuses on courage, but courage without navigation was not enough. The difference between a feared raider and a lost vessel could be a compass needle and someone who knew how to trust it. Maps were useful, but pilots were often more valuable. A map could show coastlines, harbors, shores, and routes, but a skilled pilot carried living knowledge. He knew how water changed color over reefs, where currents pulled hardest, when tides opened a passage, and which landmarks mattered from a ship's deck. That knowledge was especially valuable near unfamiliar coasts. Pirates could steal charts from a captured vessel, but charts were imperfect and sometimes outdated. A pilot who had entered the harbor before might know the safest approach. He might understand local winds or hidden hazards never written down. For this reason, pirates sometimes questioned captives carefully or forced useful sailors to guide them. The human mind could hold details no paper captured. In dangerous waters, an act memory could save the ship. It could also lead pirates directly to trade, supplies, or shelter. The pilot's value reminds us that maritime power was not only built from weapons. It was built from experience. A person who knew the coast could be worth more than the cargo. A skilled navigator could turn captured knowledge into open sea freedom. Captured papers were not just administrative clutter. They could become a map of opportunity when placed in the right hands. A skilled navigator might study logs, routes, port records, and sailing directions taken from a prize. From these details, he could infer where other ships might be, how weather had affected recent voyages, or which passages were currently active. This kind of intelligence gave pirates room to move. It helped them avoid predictable patrol zones and seek richer hunting grounds. Navigation was not a single act of steering by compass. It was an ongoing interpretation of clues. The sea gave few signs to the untrained, but a capable navigator could read scraps of information like a larger story. He turned stolen knowledge into distance and distance into safety. That made him crucial to the crew's independence. Without such skill, a pirate ship remained tied to familiar waters. With it, the horizon opened and the crew could threaten routes far beyond its starting point. Pirates watched winds, currents, clouds, and coastlines with careful attention. A pirate ship lived inside the weather. Every decision depended on forces no captain could command. Wind determined speed and direction. Currents could help a chase or ruin it. Clouds warned of squalls, and a coastline could offer shelter or danger depending on the hour. Experienced sailors observed constantly because small changes mattered. A shift in breeze might let a pirate close on a merchantman. A darkening sky might force the crew to reduce sail. Birds could hint at nearby land. The smell of vegetation could reach a ship before the shore appeared clearly. This kind of attention was not romantic guesswork. It was practical survival built through repetition. Pirates had to understand the same natural signs as any sailor, but they used them under greater pressure. A wrong reading could mean losing a prize, grounding the vessel, or being trapped by a stronger enemy. Their world rewarded patience as much as boldness. The ocean belonged to those who noticed. Hurricanes could destroy pirate fleets as surely as any navy. The Caribbean offered opportunity, but it also carried one of the deadliest hazards in the Atlantic world. A hurricane could scatter ships, tear away masts, flood holds, drive vessels onto reefs, and drown entire crews. No pirate reputation mattered against that force. Outlaws often sailed smaller, lighter vessels that gave speed in good conditions, but violent storms could expose every weakness. A crew caught at the wrong time might lose sails, water casks, weapons, boats, and the ability to steer. Even survival could leave them stranded and vulnerable. Hurricanes also shaped strategy because seasons mattered. Sailors watched the calendar with caution, knowing that certain months brought greater danger. A raiding plan that looked brilliant in fair weather could become fatal beneath a changing sky. Navies hunted pirates with guns and gallows, but nature needed neither. The storm was impartial. It wrecked merchants, warships, and pirate vessels alike. In the end, the most feared predator at sea was sometimes the weather itself. Pirates repaired ships on hidden beaches called careening grounds. A wooden sailing ship needed regular attention beneath the waterline. Barnacles, weed, and marine worms slowed it down and damaged the hull. To clean and repair that hidden surface, crews careened the vessel. They brought it into a sheltered place, unloaded weight, and hauled it partly onto its side so workers could reach the bottom. For pirates, the location had to be chosen carefully. A hidden beach, quiet inlet, or remote island could give them time to work without immediate discovery. Careening was exhausting and dangerous because the ship was temporarily helpless. If enemies arrived, escape could be difficult. Yet neglect was worse. A fouled hull reduced speed, and speed was central to piracy. Repair grounds became part of the secret geography of outlaw life. They were places where a feared vessel became vulnerable, tilted on the shore while men scraped, patched, and sweated beneath the sun. The work was unglamorous, but it kept the hunt alive. Careening exposed barnacles, leaks, rot, and secret damage. When a ship was turned for maintenance, its hidden condition came into view. The lower hull might reveal thick growths that slowed movement through the water. Seams could show where caulking had failed. Planks might be softened by rot or scarred by impact. Worm damage could threaten strength from the inside. These discoveries mattered because a vessel could look serviceable above deck while danger spread below. Pirates depended on stolen or heavily used ships, and they could not assume those hulls were sound. Careening allowed them to inspect what the sea usually concealed. The work involved scraping, burning away growth, replacing damaged wood, hammering fastenings, and sealing gaps with fiber and pitch. Each repair bought time. Each missed weakness could become disaster during a chase or storm. In this way, the ship was almost like a living body needing examination. Its sickness was hidden underwater. Only by exposing it could the crew learn whether their freedom rested on strength or on a slowly failing shell. Pirates stole sails because torn canvas could trap a crew. A sailing vessel's power came from canvas. Without good sails, even the sharpest hull and bravest crew could be helpless. Wind had to be caught, shaped, and controlled through fabric stretched across yards and rigging. Storms tore it. Battle shredded it. Sun, salt, and strain weakened it. A pirate ship with damaged sails might fail to catch a prize or fail to flee a warship. That made spare canvas a valuable capture. Pirates could cut sails from a prize, take bolts of cloth, or seize rope and rigging needed to set replacements. This kind of theft reveals how technical their needs were. They were not only grabbing audibles. They were maintaining a machine made from wood, fiber, iron, and human labor. A torn sail could change fate within minutes if the wind rose or an enemy appeared. Good canvas meant movement, and movement meant choice. At sea, choice was life. A pirate who controlled his sails controlled his chances. Gunpowder had to stay dry in a world built from spray. Few substances aboard a pirate ship were more important or more vulnerable than gunpowder. It powered cannon, pistols, and muskets, yet moisture could ruin it. The sea pushed dampness into everything. Spray came over the rails. Rain found cracks. Humid air settled below decks. A careless leak could turn valuable powder into useless paste. Crew stored it carefully, often in protected spaces where sparks and water were both feared. The danger cut both ways. Powder had to stay dry enough to fire, but it also had to be kept away from flame. A single accident could destroy a vessel from within. This made powder management a quiet discipline behind the drama of battle. Before a fight, charges had to be prepared, carried, and used with care. Afterward, stores had to be checked again. Pirate firepower depended not just on guns, but on preservation. The ocean seemed to attack powder every day, and one wet barrel could weaken an entire crew's confidence. Cannons were frightening, but boarding weapons often decided raids. Cannon fire could intimidate a target, damage rigging, or force surrender, but many pirate encounters came down to the moment men crossed from one deck to another. Boarding was personal, chaotic, and fast. Pistols, cutlasses, axes, pikes, knives, and muskets became practical tools in cramped spaces. A cannon could not easily settle every corner of a ship once attackers and defenders were tangled together. Pirates wanted to overwhelm the crew, seize key points, and prevent organized resistance. Boarding weapons were chosen for close work. A cutlass was short enough to swing on deck. A pistol could be fired quickly at near range. An axe could break obstacles or threaten defenders. The goal was not elegant swordplay. It was control. Once pirates had the deck, they could search cargo, secure prisoners, and decide the vessel's fate. The cannon created fear from a distance. The boarding weapon enforced that fear face to face. That final rush was where many raids truly turned. Pirates used grappling hooks to pull ships close together. Closing the distance between two moving vessels was a dangerous art. Once a pirate ship came near its target, the crews could throw grappling hooks attached to lines. If the hooks caught on rails, rigging, or other structures, men hauled hard to draw the vessels together. This helped create the brief connection needed for boarding. The moment was risky because ships rolled, surged, and scraped against each other. A line could snap. A hook could tear free. A defender could cut it away. But if enough lines held, the gap narrowed, and attackers could swarm across. Grappling was simple technology. It had changed the battle from pursuit to invasion. It turned two separate ships into one violent space. Pirates had to act quickly because hesitation gave defenders time to rally. The hook was more than a piece of iron. It was the hand that reached across the sea, caught the prize, and dragged opportunity close enough for men to risk their lives. Most pirate fights were brief, brutal, and practical. Pirate combat was rarely a long, graceful duel. It was usually a compressed struggle shaped by fear, speed, and calculation. The attackers wanted surrender or control before their own ship suffered serious damage. The defenders had to decide whether resistance was worth the likely cost. A few minutes could settle everything. A warning shot, a display of armed men, a volley of musket fire, or a rush over the rail might break a crew's will. If fighting continued, injuries could be terrible because wooden ships created deadly splinters when struck. Smoke reduced visibility. Noise confused orders. Men slipped on blood, water, and broken gear. Amid that chaos, pirates focused on practical goals. Silence the defenders. Secure the officers. Protect the cargo. Keep the vessel afloat. Then leave before danger grew. The shortness of many fights does not make them less frightening. It makes them more intense. A person could move from ordinary shipboard labor to life-changing violence in the space of a breath. Crews often surrendered because pirates promised mercy for cooperation. For a merchant crew facing pirates, surrender could be a rational choice. Many sailors were not paid enough to die defending someone. If pirates offered safety in exchange for cooperation, the bargain might seem obvious. Resistance could bring wounds, death, fire, or the destruction of a ship. Compliance might mean losing goods while staying alive. Pirates understood this and often used promises strategically. They might assure ordinary sailors that no harm would come if they lowered resistance, revealed stores, or helped transfer supplies. Such promises were not always trustworthy, but they could still influence decisions in the moment. The crew of a merchant vessel also had its own tensions. Officers might want to defend the owner's interests, while common sailors cared more about survival. Pirates exploited that divide. A surrendered ship could be stripped efficiently with less damage and less risk. The promise of mercy was therefore not sentimental. It was a tool of control, and it often worked because fear made practicality clear. Pirates punished captains who had mistreated ordinary sailors. The captured captain could face a very different fate depending on his reputation. Pirates often questioned crews after seizing a ship, and ordinary sailors sometimes told them exactly how they had been treated. If the captain had withheld wages, abused men, starved them, or used excessive punishment, pirates might single him out. This was not justice in a modern sense. It was rough, violent, and shaped by anger. Yet, it revealed something important about the pirate world. Many pirates had served under harsh commanders before turning outlaw, so stories of cruelty could provoke fierce resentment. A captain who had treated his crew well might be spared embarrassment or harm. One who was hated by his own sailors could be humiliated, beaten, or worse. The moment reversed the normal order of maritime life. A powerful officer suddenly had to answer before the very kind of men he once commanded. For pirate crews, punishing a cruel captain was both revenge and warning. Merchant captains feared pirates because crews might refuse to resist. A merchant captain faced danger not only from the pirate ship approaching across the water, but from doubt to board his own vessel. Many ordinary sailors had little reason to risk their lives for cargo owned by merchants far away. Their wages were often low, their conditions harsh, and their loyalty uncertain. If pirates promised safety to those who cooperated, resistance could become difficult to command. A captain might order men to fight only to sense hesitation at the guns or on the deck. That hesitation mattered. A ship depended on coordinated labor. If the crew would not load weapons, trim sails, or hold positions, the captain's authority collapsed. Pirates understood this weakness and used it. They knew that fear could divide a merchant vessel from within. The owners wanted property defended. The sailors wanted to live. In that tense moment, piracy became more than an outside attack. It exposed the fragile social structure of ordinary seafaring work. Pirate code sometimes banned gambling during voyages. Gambling may sound like a harmless way to pass time at sea, but aboard a pirate ship, it could become dangerous. Crews lived in cramped quarters, carried weapons, and depended on trust when every voyage involved risk. A card game that began with laughter could end in debt, resentment, accusation, or violence. Some pirate articles restricted or banned gambling because disputes over money could fracture the company before it ever met an enemy. This was especially important after a prize, when shares of plunder created sudden wealth among men who had recently owned almost nothing. Gambling could concentrate loot in a few hands and leave others bitter. It could also distract people from duties that kept the ship moving and safe. The rule shows how pirate discipline often grew from practical fear. A crew that tolerated every impulse might destroy itself. Outlaws still needed order. Their freedom survived only when dangerous habits were controlled before they turned shipmates into enemies. Some crews regulated drinking to prevent disorder aboard ship. Alcohol was part of maritime life, but too much of it could endanger everyone. A ship needed alert hands, especially when weather shifted or an unfamiliar sail appeared. Drunkenness could lead to missed orders, accidents in the rigging, careless fire near powder, and fights below deck. Some pirate crews tried to manage this by setting rules around drinking. The goal was not moral purity. It was survival. A crew could celebrate after a capture, but an entire vessel could not remain useless for long. Pirates lived without the safety of reliable ports or official support. So, discipline had to come from within. Regulating drink also protected the fragile balance of shipboard society. Intoxication made insults sharper and weapons more likely to appear. In a crowded wooden world, one foolish quarrel could turn deadly. These rules remind us that pirate life was not endless celebration. Even outlaws had to wake sober enough to sail, fight, repair, and flee. Musicians could receive special protection under pirate articles. A musician aboard a pirate ship might seem like a luxury, but music had practical value. Some articles gave musicians rest days or protected them from certain duties because their role helped the whole crew. At sea, morale mattered. Weeks of labor, danger, hunger, and uncertainty could wear men down. Music gave shape to time. It could mark celebration after a successful capture, soften boredom during long stretches, or lift spirits when conditions turn grim. In a world with few comforts, a fiddle, drum, or pipe could become strangely important. A musician might also help keep rhythm during work that required coordinated movement. The special treatment was not always generous in a sentimental way. It was recognition that sound could hold a crew together. Pirates understood that fear and force were not enough to maintain a ship. People needed release, energy, and shared moments. A protected musician helped supply those things when the ocean offered little kindness. Shipboard music helped crews work, rest, and keep rhythm. A sailing ship was full of tasks that depended on timing. Hauling lines, raising sails, turning capstans, and pumping water could require many bodies moving together. Music helped coordinate that effort. A steady tune made labor feel less chaotic and gave sailors a shared beat to follow. It also helped separate the day into human moments. Work at sea could blur into exhaustion, especially when watches repeated through darkness and bad weather. A song could make time feel measurable again. Pirates inherited this wider maritime culture, and their ships carried the same need for rhythm. Music could also turn tension into release. After danger passed, a tune might restore the sense that the crew was still alive and still together. Not every sound aboard ship was pleasant. There were creaking timbers, shouted orders, snapping canvas, and the constant movement of water. Against that noise, music offered pattern. It reminded men that they were not only surviving the sea, they were moving through it together. Pirates valued intelligence gathered from prisoners, ports, and captured papers. Information could be as valuable as cargo. After taking a vessel, pirates often wanted to know where it had sailed from, where it was going, what other ships had been seen, and where the naval patrols were nearby. Prisoners might reveal convoy schedules, harbor conditions, or rumors of rich prizes. Captured letters and logbooks could carry clues about trade movements. Port gossip could be even more useful, especially in places where sailors drank, complained, and talked too freely. A pirate crew that understood the movement of ships could position itself with far greater confidence. Without intelligence, it might waste weeks searching empty water. With good intelligence, it could appear where merchants least wanted it. This gave piracy a hidden mental side. The attack people remembered was only the visible moment. Before that came listening, questioning, comparing, and deciding. Pirates were not merely violent opportunists. The successful ones were collectors of maritime knowledge, turning scraps of speech and paper into routes toward profit. News traveled quickly through sailors, taverns, and coastal markets. In the age of sail, information moved by human voices as much as official documents. Sailors carried news from harbor to harbor. Tavern keepers heard stories from crews fresh off long passages. Dock workers noticed cargoes, damaged departures, and rumors of pursuit. Market sellers learned which goods had arrived and which ships had failed to appear. This informal network could spread a pirate's name with remarkable speed. It could also warn pirates of danger. A new governor, a naval patrol, or a convoy plan might be discussed long before it reached formal records. Ports were listening places. Every cup of drink, repaired rope, sold barrel, or hired boat could become part of the flow of knowledge. Pirates survived by paying attention to that flow. They lived in a world where news was not broadcast, but it was rarely still. A careless sentence in one harbor might shape an attack hundreds of miles away. The sea was wide, yet gossip made it strangely connected. Pirates often sold stolen goods through hidden networks on land. A pirate ship could seize cargo, but loot only became useful when it could be eaten, traded, spent, or sold. That required land connections. Stolen goods moved through people willing to look away, ask few questions, or profit from danger. A barrel of sugar, a bolt of cloth, a chest of tools, or a sack of coins might pass from pirate hands into coastal markets through quiet arrangements. Some goods were broken into smaller lots to disguise their origin. Others were sold cheaply because secrecy mattered more than perfect price. This hidden economy tied pirates to communities that publicly condemned them. A harbor might fear pirates and still benefit from their cargo. Small traders, corrupt officials, tavern keepers, and local merchants could all become part of the chain. The pirate vessel was only the dramatic beginning. The quieter story happened on shore, where stolen property changed names, changed hands, and entered ordinary life as if it had always belonged there. Fencers and merchants helped turn stolen cargo into usable wealth. Pirates needed middlemen because stolen goods were often awkward to use directly. A crew could not easily divide an entire cargo of tobacco, indigo, sugar, or fabric among every sailor and call the matter finished. Someone had to value it, store it, transport it, and find buyers. Fencers and merchants filled that role. They accepted risk in exchange for profit. Some paid pirates below the true value, knowing the sellers had limited choices. Others built long relationships with raiders and supplied them in return. This made piracy part of a broader economic system rather than a series of isolated attacks. Respectable trade and criminal trade could touch behind closed doors. A merchant who looked clean in public might handle dirty cargo in private. This connection helped pirates survive beyond the moment of capture. Without buyers, plunder piled uselessly in the hold. With buyers, it became food, powder, repairs, bribes, and spending money. The hidden merchant could be as necessary as the armed raider. Governors sometimes tolerated pirates when stolen goods enriched local economies. Colonial governors did not always have the power, money, or ships needed to enforce every law. Some also faced local pressure from communities that benefited when pirates brought in goods. A town short of supplies might welcome cheap cargo, even if everyone suspected where it came from. Officials could issue warnings in public while accepting advantages in private. Piracy became especially tempting to tolerate when raiders targeted rival empires. If stolen wealth weakened an enemy and strengthened a local port, the moral problem could be conveniently softened. This tolerance was rarely stable. It depended on politics, distance, profit, and deniability. A governor might protect a useful raider one year and condemn him the next. The arrangement reveals the fragile nature of imperial authority. Laws written across the ocean had to pass through local needs. When money entered the harbor, principles could become flexible. Pirates exploited that flexibility with skill. They understood that a friendly official, or a silent one, could be worth more than another cannon. Colonial officials fought piracy when it threatened official trade. Tolerance faded when pirates became too disruptive. Empires depended on shipping for taxes, supplies, military movement, and commercial profit. If raiders attacked the wrong vessels, frightened merchants, or embarrassed officials, the response could harden quickly. Colonial authorities then offered pardons, sent naval patrols, gathered intelligence, and staged trials meant to restore confidence. They also pressured ports that had quietly traded with pirates. The change was not always driven by sudden moral clarity. It often came from economic necessity. Official trade had to appear protected, or merchants might lose faith in imperial routes. Pirates were useful only while they could be contained or directed toward acceptable targets. Once they threatened the system itself, they became enemies of order. This is why pirate history often turns on shifting political winds. A crew that once sold goods openly might find the harbor closed. A governor who once looked away might sign warrants. At that moment, the outlaw economy met the full weight of empire. Pirates relied on safe harbors as much as daring attacks. The most dramatic part of piracy happened when a ship was chased or boarded, but survival depended just as much on places of shelter. A safe harbor let a crew repair damage, take on water, divide plunder, treat injuries, recruit hands, and gather news. Without such places, even a successful pirate vessel would deteriorate. Ships were fragile working machines, and crews were human bodies under strain. A hidden anchorage or tolerant port gave them time to recover between risks. Safe harbors could be remote coves, friendly settlements, river mouths, or island bases. Their value came from secrecy, geography, local cooperation, or weak authority. A pirate who had nowhere to land was trapped in a shrinking world of empty barrels and worn rigging. This is why governments targeted pirate havens, as well as pirate ships. Destroying shelter could be more effective than winning a battle. Daring attacks made reputations, but harbors made careers possible. Outlaws needed shorelines to keep returning to the sea. Madagascar became a legendary refuge for Indian Ocean pirates. Madagascar held a powerful attraction for pirates who sailed the Indian Ocean. Its position near major routes made it useful, and its long coastline offered places where ships could anchor, repair, trade, or hide. European authority there was limited compared with heavily controlled colonial ports. That gave sea raiders room to operate between worlds. They could strike rich traffic moving across the ocean, then retreat to places where pursuit was difficult. Over time, Stories about pirate settlements on Madagascar grew into legend. Some tales described communities of outlaws living beyond the reach of kings. The reality was likely more complicated, involving local alliances, trade, conflict, and temporary arrangements, rather than one simple pirate kingdom. Still, the island's reputation mattered. It became a symbol of distance from European law. For pirates, distance was freedom. Madagascar offered the dream of a shore where the hunted could become settlers, traders, or rulers of their own rough corner of the world. The Indian Ocean offered pirates rich ships and vast distances. The Indian Ocean was one of the great commercial arenas of the early modern world. Ships crossed it carrying textiles, spices, precious metals, coffee, porcelain, and other valuable goods. Trade connected ports across Africa, Arabia, India, and Southeast Asia. For pirates, that meant opportunity on a scale far beyond the Caribbean imagination. A single prize could carry extraordinary wealth. The distances also mattered. Vast waters made pursuit difficult, and jurisdiction was complicated by many powers, languages, and trading systems. A pirate crew could move between regions searching for weakness and confusion. The ocean's monsoon rhythms shaped voyages, creating predictable seasons of movement. Those patterns could help raiders anticipate traffic. But the same scale that offered opportunity also carried danger. Supplies had to stretch. Repairs were harder. And unfamiliar coasts could be unforgiving. The Indian Ocean rewarded crews with knowledge, patience, and nerve. Its prizes were rich enough to tempt men across the world, and its size gave them room to vanish. If you think you already know how the biggest pirate story of all ends, wait until you hear this one. Henry Every became famous after one of history's richest pirate captures, because he achieved what many pirates dreamed of, and then slipped away. In the 1690s, his crew captured a tremendously wealthy Mughal ship returning from pilgrimage. The prize caused international outrage because it threatened English relations with the Mughal Empire, whose trade mattered greatly. Every's name spread through pamphlets, rumors, and official proclamations. A massive hunt followed. Some of his crew were caught, tried, and executed. Every himself was not clearly found. That disappearance turned him into something larger than an ordinary fugitive. Stories claimed he had become a king, settled in luxury, or escaped under another identity. The truth is more uncertain, and that uncertainty is exactly why his legend endured. Most pirates ended in poverty, prison, battle, or execution. Every seemed to break the pattern. He took a prize that shook governments, then vanished into the gaps of the record. His story became the fantasy of piracy made real. Enormous wealth followed by silence. Captain Kidd became infamous partly because politics turned against him. William Kidd's story is not simple. He began with powerful backers and a commission that was supposed to authorize him to hunt pirates and enemy shipping. Yet, his voyage became tangled in suspicion, poor fortune, crew pressure, questionable captures, and changing political needs. When he returned, the people who had once been useful connections became liabilities. Powerful men had reasons to distance themselves. Kidd became a convenient figure onto whom blame could settle. His trial and execution turned him into a symbol of piracy, but his career sits in a murky borderland between privateering, failed command, and criminal accusation. This ambiguity helped make him famous. Later, treasure stories transformed him into a legendary hoarder of buried wealth, even though the real case was rooted in law and politics. Kidd's downfall shows how dangerous official commission could be when events shifted. A document that seemed protective at the start of a voyage might not save a man once governments needed a villain. Bartholomew Roberts captured hundreds of ships in only a few years. Bartholomew Roberts was one of the most astonishingly successful pirates of the early 18th century. His career lasted only a short time, yet he reportedly took hundreds of vessels across the Atlantic world. What makes this remarkable is not just the number, but the speed. Roberts operated with discipline, confidence, and a strong sense of command. He used captured ships, shifted hunting grounds, and struck different regions before authorities could fully contain him. His crew followed strict articles, and his image became part of his power. Unlike some pirates who are remembered mostly for theatrical menace, Roberts stands out for operational success. He threatened commerce across a wide area, and forced serious responses from naval powers. His end came in battle against a British warship, which shows how the pressure eventually tightened around him. Yet the scale of his captures remains extraordinary. In a profession where many crews barely survived a few voyages, Roberts built a record that made him one of piracy's most formidable figures. And Bonny became famous for fighting beside male pirates. And Bonny's fame rests on the way she disrupted expectations in a world usually described through men. She became associated with the crew of Calico Jack Rackham, and appears in trial records that help turn her into a lasting figure. The details of her life are partly tangled with legend, but her presence aboard a pirate vessel was real enough to shock contemporaries. She was said to have fought during the final confrontation when Rackham's crew was captured. Later stories emphasized her boldness, temper, and refusal to fit the passive role expected of women in her society. Her fame also reveals how rare women were in the surviving records of piracy, or at least how rarely they were acknowledged. Bonny became fascinating because she stood at the crossing point of crime, gender, danger, and performance. Whether every tale about her is true is less important than the historical force of her image. She made the pirate deck feel less predictable. Mary Read concealed her identity before joining a pirate crew. Mary Read's life reads like something invented. Yet the broad outline comes from early accounts and court records. She reportedly spent parts of her youth dressed as a boy, which allowed her to move through spaces usually closed to women. She later served in military and maritime settings before becoming linked with Calico Jack Rackham's crew. Her concealed identity was not merely a disguise for adventure. In her world, clothing could determine access to work, movement, and survival. By presenting herself as male, she could enter dangerous occupations that offered independence unavailable to many women. Once aboard a pirate vessel, her story became even more remarkable because she was remembered as someone willing to fight. After capture, she and Bonny both avoided immediate execution by pleading pregnancy. Read died in prison, which gives her story a grim ending beneath the legend. Her life shows how piracy sometimes intersected with hidden identities, social limits, and the fierce will to survive outside ordinary expectations. Ching Shih negotiated retirement instead of dying on the gallows. Many famous pirates ended with a rope, a prison cell, or a battlefield. Ching Shih achieved something far rarer. After commanding immense power in the South China Sea, she negotiated a settlement with authorities. This was not a simple surrender by a defeated nobody. She had led or influenced a confederation that challenged imperial forces and controlled large numbers of vessels. Her ability to bargain reflected the scale of her organization and the difficulty of crushing it outright. The agreement allowed many pirates to lay down arms with reduced punishment, and she herself kept wealth and lived beyond the life of piracy. That outcome is astonishing because pirate legends often build toward destruction. Her story builds toward negotiation. It shows intelligence as much as daring. She understood when violence had reached its useful limit and when survival required a different skill. In a history crowded with dramatic deaths, her greatest victory may have been leaving the game alive. Grace O'Malley challenged English power along Ireland's western coast. Grace O'Malley belonged to a very different pirate tradition from the Caribbean figures most people imagine. She was an Irish leader from the 16th century tied to seafaring power, local politics, and resistance along the west coast of Ireland. Her ships operated in a world of clan authority, regional conflict, and growing English pressure. She traded, raided, negotiated, and defended her family's interests with striking determination. Her most famous moment came when she met Queen Elizabeth I. That meeting has become legendary because it placed two formidable women face to face at a time when political power was overwhelmingly male. O'Malley was not simply a romantic outlaw. She was a maritime power broker navigating a dangerous political landscape. Her story expands the meaning of piracy. It was not always a matter of skull flags and distant treasure. Sometimes it was local sovereignty fought through ships, harbors, kinship, and nerve. Along Ireland's western edge, the sea became her road to authority. The Barbary corsairs captured ships across the Mediterranean for centuries. For hundreds of years, the Barbary corsairs were a major force in Mediterranean and Atlantic waters. Operating from North African ports, they attacked shipping, seized cargo, and captured people for ransom or enslavement. Their world was shaped by conflict between states, religions, empires, and commercial powers. Some corsairs held official backing from local rulers, which made their position closer to privateering in certain contexts. To their victims, the distinction mattered little. A captured ship could mean imprisonment, forced labor, ransom negotiations, or sale in slave markets. European states responded in different ways. Some paid tribute. Some sent naval expeditions. Some negotiated prisoner releases. The corsairs endured because they were part of a larger political and economic system, not simply isolated criminals. Their history reminds us that piracy was not confined to the Caribbean or to a single age. Across the Mediterranean, maritime raiding became a long-running institution that shaped diplomacy, coastal defense, and the fears of sailors for generations. Vikings were sea raiders long before the word pirate became familiar. Centuries before the classic pirate image took shape, Viking raiders used ships to transform the history of Europe. Their longships could cross open water and move up rivers, which allowed them to strike monasteries, towns, and trading centers with startling speed. They were not only raiders. They were also traders, settlers, explorers, and rulers. But their seaborne attacks left a deep mark on memory because they brought danger from directions people could not easily defend. A community far inland might still be vulnerable if a river connected it to the sea. Viking mobility made geography feel unstable. Coasts and waterways became openings rather than borders. Their raids helped reshape kingdoms, tribute systems, fortifications, and political power. Calling them pirates can be useful, but it is also incomplete. They belong to a broader Norse world with its own laws and ambitions. Still, their story proves that maritime raiding is far older than the age of cannons, Caribbean ports, and black flags. Ancient pirates once kidnapped Julius Caesar and badly misjudged him. As a young man, Julius Caesar was captured by pirates in the eastern Mediterranean. The story is famous because Caesar reportedly behaved with startling confidence during his captivity. He is said to have mocked the ransom demand as too low and insisted they ask for more. While waiting for payment, he treated his captors almost like subordinates, joining their activities and warning them that he would have them punished after his release. The pirates apparently took this as arrogance or humor. Caesar did not forget. Once freed, he raised forces, pursued them, and had them executed. The tale may have been shaped by later Roman storytelling, but it captures something powerful about reputation and character in ancient politics. The pirates thought they had taken a wealthy hostage. They had actually seized a man whose ambition would help change Rome forever. Their mistake was not kidnapping someone important. Their mistake was failing to understand how dangerous that captive would become once he was back on land. Rome fought piracy after raids threatened grain supplies. Piracy became a crisis for Rome when it threatened the systems that fed the city and supported its power. Grain shipments were vital, especially from regions across the Mediterranean. If pirates disrupted those routes, they did not merely inconvenience merchants. They endangered public order, military supply, and political stability. By the late Roman Republic, piracy had grown bold enough to alarm the state. Ships were attacked, coastal communities suffered, and trade became uncertain. Rome eventually gave Pompey extraordinary authority to suppress the problem. His campaign combined naval force, organization, and control of sea zones. The response shows how piracy can push governments into major action when it touches essential resources. As long as raiding remained distant, officials might tolerate delay. When food security and state prestige were at stake, the calculation changed. Rome's struggle with pirates reminds us that sea raiding is never just a story of criminals and ships. It can become a test of whether a state can protect the arteries that keep it alive. Pirates have existed wherever trade routes created tempting targets. Piracy is not tied to one costume, one ocean, or one century. It appears again and again because trade creates movement, and movement creates vulnerability. Whenever valuable goods travel by water, someone may try to intercept them. Ancient Mediterranean merchants faced raiders. Asian trade routes drew attacks. Atlantic empires produced sea robbers and privateers. River systems, coastal roads, and island passages all created chances for ambush. The form changes with technology. Oared galleys, sailing ships, steam vessels, and modern motorboats belong to very different worlds, yet the basic pattern remains recognizable. A route becomes rich. Protection remains incomplete. Raiders learn where ships slow, gather, or pass predictably. This is why piracy is best understood as a shadow cast by commerce. It follows wealth across water. It grows where enforcement is weak, where geography helps attackers, or where political disorder opens space. The pirate is not an accident outside the system. He is one of the system's recurring dangers. River pirates attacked boats far from the open sea. Piracy did not require blue water or distant islands. Rivers could be just as dangerous because they carried trade through narrow, predictable paths. Boats moving along inland waterways often transported food, tools, money, timber, furs, or passengers. They could not simply steer into open space when threatened. Banks, bends, shallows, and currents limited movement. That made ambush easier. River pirates could hide near wooded edges, isolated landings, or difficult turns where vessels slowed. In some regions, they combined theft with local intimidation, using knowledge of the landscape to disappear before authorities arrived. The danger felt different from ocean piracy. It could happen close to farms, towns, and frontier settlements. A traveler might think land was nearby enough to offer safety, only to discover that the river itself had become a trap. River piracy shows how the core idea of piracy adapts. It is not defined by romance or distance. It is robbery shaped by water, opportunity, and escape. Lake pirates once threatened trade across North America's Great Lakes. Large lakes can feel almost like inland seas, and the Great Lakes created enormous routes for commerce. During the 19th century, ships carried timber, grain, fish, coal, passengers, and manufactured goods across waters that were wide, busy, and sometimes poorly policed. This environment allowed theft, smuggling, and violent crime to develop around harbors, islands, and remote shorelines. Lake pirates did not fit the tropical image of piracy, yet they exploited many of the same conditions. There were valuable cargoes, isolated vessels, difficult weather, and jurisdictional confusion. A criminal could move between ports or hide among legitimate maritime activity. Some stole from wrecks. Others targeted docked vessels or cargo in transit. The Great Lakes also had storms fierce enough to scatter ships and create opportunities for plunder. This history surprises people because it moves piracy into a colder, industrial, inland setting. It proves that the pirate story did not end at the ocean's edge. Wherever water carried wealth, predators could follow. Wreckers were accused of luring ships toward dangerous shores. Few coastal legends are darker than the story of wreckers who supposedly tricked ships into disaster. The accusation was that people on shore used false lights to confuse sailors at night, drawing vessels onto rocks or sandbars so cargo could be stolen from the wreck. In reality, many wrecking communities lived in a complicated moral world. Some did loot stranded ships. Others salvaged goods under local custom or law. Many also rescued survivors when they could. The legend of deliberate luring became powerful because shipwreck was already terrifying. A crew in darkness near an unknown coast depended on lights as signs of safety. If those signs could be false, then the shoreline itself became treacherous. Whether every accusation was true is doubtful, but the fear reveals how valuable wrecked cargo could be. A broken ship might scatter wealth across a beach overnight. For poor coastal communities, that temptation was immense. The line between salvage, survival, theft, and murder could become dangerously thin. Some so-called pirates were smugglers avoiding taxes and monopolies. Not every outlaw at sea was chasing ships with drawn weapons. Some were avoiding official trade systems that made ordinary goods expensive, restricted, or impossible to buy legally. Empires often controlled commerce through taxes, licenses, monopolies, and customs rules. These systems protected powerful interests, but they also created frustration in distant colonies. A settlement might need tea, cloth, tools, or salt. Yet, official channels could be slow, costly, or tightly controlled. Smugglers moved through that gap. They landed goods at night, bribed officials, used hidden coves, and relied on local people who preferred cheap supplies to strict obedience. To governments, this could look like piracy because it challenged authority at sea. To customers on shore, it might look like practical trade. The line became especially blurred when smugglers carried weapons or worked with raiders. Their story shows that maritime crime was not always about dramatic attacks. Sometimes, it was about ordinary demand pushing against imperial control until the coastline became a marketplace in disguise. Piracy blurred the line between crime, war, and business. At sea, the same action could be described in completely different ways depending on who benefited. Capturing a ship might be called piracy by the victim, patriotism by an enemy nation, and investment by the merchants who funded the voyage. War made this confusion worse because governments often encouraged private violence against rival trade. Business interests then followed the money. Investors supplied vessels. Sailors joined for shares. Ports profited from captured cargo. When politics shifted, the same men could suddenly be condemned as criminals. This made piracy less like a separate underworld and more like a shadow version of official maritime power. It borrowed the tools of commerce, the language of war, and the methods of robbery. That is why pirate history can feel so morally tangled. The ocean did not draw neat borders between legality and theft. Papers, flags, witnesses, and power decided the label afterward. For the people aboard a captured ship, however, the experience was immediate. Whatever the law called it, force had arrived. A letter of marque could turn raiding into legal service. A letter of marque was a government document that gave private sailors permission to attack enemy ships during war. It turned a privately owned vessel into a weapon of the state. The arrangement suited rulers because it expanded pressure on enemies without the full cost of naval fleets. It suited ship owners because captured cargo could bring enormous profit. Yet the document also created problems. It depended on rules about who could be attacked, where prizes should be brought, and how claims should be judged. In the confusion of distant waters, those rules were easy to stretch. A crew might stop a questionable vessel, invent a justification, or keep raiding after orders changed. The paper itself could become a shield for behavior but looked very close to piracy. Still, it mattered greatly in court and in politics. One signed authority could decide whether a sea raider was treated as a useful servant or a hanging criminal. Law at sea could fit inside a folded page. The same sailor could be patriot, privateer, and pirate. A maritime life could change labels without changing skills. A sailor might begin by serving his country during war. He could then join a privateering voyage that promised profit from enemy ships. Later, if the commission expired or temptation overcame caution, he might attack vessels without legal protection. To him, the work could feel continuous. He still handled sails, loaded guns, boarded prizes, and divided rewards. To governments, the change in status could be enormous. One year, he might be praised for damaging an enemy's trade. The next, he might be hunted for threatening commerce that was now protected by peace. This fluid identity helps explain why piracy attracted experienced seamen. They were not learning a completely new craft. They were redirecting abilities shaped by war, trade, and survival. The same hand could serve a navy, enrich investors, or rob at sea. The difference often came down to timing, paperwork, and politics. The ocean remembered skill more clearly than it remembered titles. Pirate trials were public warnings as much as legal proceedings. When captured pirates were brought to court, the event was meant to do more than decide guilt. It sent a message. Authorities wanted sailors, merchants, and coastal communities to see that piracy would end in humiliation and punishment. Trials were often held in port cities where maritime people could hear the evidence and absorb the warning. Testimony might describe attacks, stolen goods, forced service, or acts of violence. The legal process also helped governments show that they, not pirates, controlled the sea. This mattered because piracy challenged confidence in trade and imperial power. A public trial turned an outlaw's story into a lesson. Some accused men claimed they had been forced to serve. Others insisted their actions were legal under commissions or wartime confusion. Those arguments did not always save them. The spectacle itself carried weight. The court, the witnesses, the sentence, and the crowd all worked together. Justice was being performed, and fear was part of the performance. Executed pirates were sometimes displayed near harbors to frighten sailors. The punishment did not always end with death. In some cases, bodies of executed pirates were placed near waterways in cages, or displayed where passing ships could see them. The sight was meant to linger in the mind of every sailor entering or leaving the harbor. It turned the coastline into a warning sign. A person tempted by piracy could look up and imagine his own end suspended above the tide. This practice was harsh, but it reveals how seriously authorities treated maritime crime. A pirate could damage trade, embarrass officials, and inspire others to desert ordinary service. Public display attacked that dangerous appeal. It stripped away the glamour of freedom and replaced it with decay, exposure, and shame. The harbor was chosen carefully because that was where sailors gathered, departed, and dreamed of fortune. The message followed them out to sea. Whatever stories taverns told about riches and daring, the state answered with a body in chains. The skull and crossbones became famous because fear was useful. The symbol worked because it could be understood instantly. A skull meant death. Crossed bones strengthened the warning. On a moving ship, there was no time for complicated messages. A crew sighting that design knew it faced danger, and that recognition could speed surrender. Over time, the image became attached to the wider pirate myth until it seemed universal. Even though real flags varied greatly, its power came from simplicity. It turned a distant vessel into a threat before a cannon spoke. It also helped pirates perform identity. By raising such a symbol, they declared themselves outside normal trade and ordinary command. The design later escaped history and entered theater. Children's books, films, toys, and costumes. That afterlife has made it almost playful today. Yet its original purpose was deadly serious. It was a piece of visual pressure meant to shorten decisions under fear. Few images in maritime history have traveled so far from terror into entertainment. Not every pirate flag showed a skull and crossbones. The familiar design was only one part of a larger world of pirate signaling. Some flags showed skeletons, hourglasses, weapons, bleeding hearts, or full human figures associated with death. Others were plainer, relying on color and reputation rather than elaborate artwork. A flag's design could reflect a particular captain, crew, threat, or theatrical style. This variety matters because it reminds us that pirates were not following one fixed costume code. They adapted symbols to create fear in the moment. An hourglass suggested time was running out. A weapon made the threat clear. A skeleton turned mortality into a banner. These images had to be visible and meaningful across distance, smoke, and confusion. Some may have been exaggerated in later accounts, but the principle remained strong. Pirate flags were practical messages shaped by imagination. The modern world has simplified them into one emblem. But the real sea carried a stranger gallery. The horizon could reveal not one pirate symbol, but many possible warnings. Red pirate flag suggested no mercy would be offered. Color could change the message before a single word was spoken. A red flag was often understood as a sign of extreme danger, sometimes suggesting that resistance would bring no quarter. That did not mean every crew used it in exactly the same way, but its reputation made it frightening. If a black signal invited surrender under threat, a red one could imply that the time for negotiation was closing or already gone. Imagine the psychological pressure on a merchant vessel when the pursuing ship changed its colors. The decision to fight might suddenly feel far more costly. Whether the pirates intended complete slaughter or simply wanted to intensify fear, the effect could be powerful. But sea signals had to carry emotion as well as information. Red did that with brutal clarity. It suggested blood, urgency, and punishment. The color became part of the choreography of intimidation, a visual step that could push a wavering crew toward panic. Black flags often invited surrender before violence began. A dark flag was frightening, but it could also contain a choice. In many situations, it signaled that pirates were offering a chance to yield before combat. That may sound strange, yet it was practical. A merchant ship that surrendered could be taken with less damage, and pirates could avoid injuries that weakened their own crew. The flag delivered a message across distance. Resist, and the consequences may worsen. Submit, and survival may be possible. This made the black flag a tool of negotiation as much as terror. It created a moment of decision for the target. Sailors had to judge the wind, their captain's resolve, the attacker's speed, and their own appetite for risk. A symbol that appears simple in modern culture carried a tense, practical meaning on the water. It compressed threat and offer into one signal. The flag did not need to say much. Its silence was part of its force. It let imagination do the work. Pirate clothing was usually practical rather than theatrical. The pirate wardrobe of popular culture is full of bright coats, dramatic hats, high boots, and perfect swagger. Real clothing at sea was shaped by labor, weather, and availability. Sailors needed garments that could survive salt, tar, sweat, sun, rain, and constant movement. Loose shirts, breeches, jackets, caps, scarves, and sturdy shoes were more useful than grand costumes. A pirate might wear stolen finery ashore to display sudden wealth, but aboard ship practicality usually won. Clothing wore out quickly, and replacement depended on capture or trade. A silk garment could be valuable, but it might be less useful during hauling, climbing, or repair than plain working clothes. This does not mean pirates always looked dull. A mixed crew wearing captured items from many regions could appear striking. Yet the look came from circumstance rather than costume design. Their clothes told a story of hard use, stolen supply, and rough adaptation. The theatrical pirate came later, polished by stage and illustration. Earrings may have helped sailors carry portable wealth. The famous pirate earring may have a practical explanation, though the truth is mixed with folklore. Sailors often needed ways to keep valuables close in a world where possessions could be lost, stolen, or washed away. A gold ring worn on the body was harder to misplace than coins in a chest. It could be traded, pawned, or used in an emergency. Some stories claim earrings helped pay for burial if a sailor died far from home. That idea is difficult to prove as a universal custom, but it shows how people imagined portable wealth at sea. Jewelry could also be taken from prizes and worn as a display of success. On a ship where storage was limited and trust uncertain, wealth attached to the body made sense. The earring became famous because it was visible and memorable. Behind the image lies a practical concern. How does a traveling sailor carry value through danger when the sea can take everything else? Eye patches were not standard pirate equipment. The eye patch has become so connected with pirates that it feels almost required. Yet real evidence does not support it as a standard feature. Some sailors certainly lost eyes through combat, splinters, disease, or accident, and a covering could protect an injury. But the idea that pirates commonly wore patches as part of their identity belongs mostly to later storytelling. One popular theory claims sailors used patches to keep one eye adjusted for darkness below deck. It is clever, but it is not well supported as a known pirate practice. The stronger truth is simpler. Maritime life could injure bodies, and fiction turned visible injury into costume. An eye patch instantly suggests danger, survival, and rough experience. It helps an audience recognize a pirate at a glance. Real pirates did not need such symbols to know who they were. Their world was defined by work, risk, and violence, not by matching accessories. The patch is powerful because myth likes clear images. Peg legs existed, but popular culture exaggerated their frequency. Wooden legs were real in the age of sail because injury was common, and medical options were limited. A person who survived amputation might use a crude prosthetic to stand, move, or work again. But the idea that pirate crews were crowded with peg-legged characters is an exaggeration built by fiction. Life aboard ship required balance, climbing, hauling, and quick response to danger. Severe disability could make service extremely difficult, though not always impossible. Some injured sailors found roles that matched their remaining abilities, especially if they had experience or authority. The famous image owes much to later adventure literature, where a distinctive body became a memorable storytelling device. It suggested hardship, menace, and a past full of violence. The historical reality was more varied and often more painful. A lost limb meant changed work, chronic discomfort, and uncertain survival. The wooden leg should not be treated as a cartoon prop. It was evidence of a body that had paid dearly for life at sea. Parrots became pirate symbols because sailors traded exotic animals. Parrots fit pirate imagery because they connect the sea to distant trade. Sailors moving through tropical regions encountered colorful birds that could be bought, sold, gifted, or carried home as curiosities. The talking parrot was especially valuable because it seemed entertaining and rare to Europeans. Pirates, privateers, and ordinary sailors all existed within networks that moved animals as well as goods. A bird taken aboard could become a novelty in port, where it might fetch money or attract attention. The later image of a parrot perched on a pirate's shoulder grew from this maritime trade in exotic creatures, then became fixed through stories and illustration. Real ships were dirty, crowded, and dangerous places for animals, so the cheerful companion image is simplified. Still, parrots belonged to the wider world pirates exploited. They represented tropical routes, colonial markets, and the strange cargoes that passed through sailors' hands. The bird became a symbol because it made distance visible. It carried the color of faraway ports. Buried treasure was incredibly rare among real pirates. The buried chest is one of the strongest images in pirate legend. Yet, most pirates had little reason to hide wealth underground. Loot was usually divided, spent, traded, or used quickly. A crew needed food, drink, repairs, weapons, clothing, and pleasure on shore. Keeping treasure buried required secrecy, a safe location, and the expectation of returning. Pirate life rarely offered such stability. Men were captured, killed, betrayed, scattered, or forced to move on. Cargo also came in forms that did not bury well. Cloth rotted. Food spoiled. Tools were more useful in hand than under sand. Coins and precious metals could be hidden, but large secret hoards were not the ordinary pattern. The legend became powerful because it promises mystery and discovery. It turns theft into a puzzle waiting for a map. Real piracy was less tidy. Wealth moved fast through taverns, markets, fences, and cruise shares. The treasure did not sleep beneath the earth. It usually vanished into use. Captain Kidd helped inspire the buried treasure legend. William Kidd became linked to hidden treasure because some of his goods were actually buried after he returned from his controversial voyage. A small cache was placed on Gardiner's Island, and authorities later recovered it. This real event gave later imaginations a powerful seed. If one famous pirate had buried valuables, perhaps others had left secret hoards, too. Over time, the story expanded far beyond the evidence. Kidd became associated with maps, lost chests, and mysterious islands in popular culture. His name turned into a magnet for treasure hunters. The irony is that the real buried goods were part of a legal and political drama, not a romantic game. They were evidence, leverage, and property at the center of a case that ended badly for Kidd. Yet, stories prefer the locked chest to the courtroom. From one genuine cache grew a wider mythology of hidden pirate wealth. Kidd's afterlife became more glittering than his reality, and far more profitable for storytellers. Pirates usually spent loot quickly in ports and taverns. A successful raid could bring sudden wealth to men who had lived with little comfort. Once ashore, many spent freely. Taverns, lodging houses, gambling rooms, brothels, merchants, and food sellers could absorb plunder with remarkable speed. This behavior was not simply foolishness, although waste certainly happened. Pirate life was uncertain, and long-term saving made little sense when capture or death might come soon. A sailor who had survived hunger, battle, and storms might want pleasure immediately. Ports were ready to provide it. Local economies' cargo became supplies. Fine items were sold, worn, or traded away. By the time authorities traced a prize, much of its value might be scattered across a town. The pirate dream imagines treasure carefully preserved. The real pattern was often the opposite. Plunder burned bright, moved fast, and left behind stories, debts, and empty pockets. Coins from many empires could pass through a single pirate crew. A pirate share might contain money from several worlds at once. Spanish silver, English coins, French currency, Dutch pieces, Portuguese gold, and local forms of exchange could all appear in maritime circulation. Ships moved through overlapping empires, and pirates took from whoever seemed vulnerable or valuable. This made a captured purse a small map of global trade. Coins carried rulers' faces, imperial symbols, dates, and metals mined far away. A crew dividing them might handle evidence of wars, colonies, mines, and trade routes without thinking of it that way. Value mattered more than national identity. Silver could be weighed, exchanged, clipped, hoarded, or spent according to local conditions. Some coins traveled astonishing distances before ending in a pirate's hand. They might begin in a mine, pass through merchants, cross an ocean, survive a raid, and vanish into a tavern payment. Money at sea was restless. Pirate crews did not create that movement. They interrupted it, redirected it, and briefly held the world's commerce in their palms. Silver from the Americas helped fuel Atlantic piracy. The Spanish Empire moved enormous quantities of silver from mines in the Americas into global trade. That metal linked colonial extraction to European finance and Asian markets. It also attracted raiders. Ships carrying silver or goods connected to that wealth became tempting targets because precious metal was compact, durable, and widely accepted. Even when pirates did not capture treasure fleets directly, the wider flow of silver enriched ports and trade routes. Wealth moving across predictable maritime systems created opportunity for attack. This is one of the deeper forces behind Atlantic piracy. It was not only produced by daring individuals. It was powered by the movement of imperial wealth on water. Silver made the ocean glitter in the imagination of sailors, investors, and thieves. But that shine came from harsh colonial labor and violent conquest. Pirate stories often focus on the moment of capture. Yet the metal had a longer history before it reached the sea. Every coin carried the weight of an empire. Spanish treasure ships attracted pirates because empire moved wealth by sea. Spain's overseas empire depended on maritime connection. Precious metals, official cargo, supplies, letters, soldiers, and administrators all had to cross the Atlantic. Treasure ships became famous because they concentrated wealth into moving targets. They were often protected, organized, and watched. But the temptation remained enormous. Pirates and privateers understood that empire was vulnerable wherever it floated. A fortune locked in a fortress was hard to reach. A fortune aboard a ship had to pass through weather, distance, navigation errors, and enemy waters. Even when heavily guarded fleets were difficult to attack, smaller related vessels could be vulnerable. The very need to move wealth created risk. This shaped the imagination of the age. Sailors dreamed of prizes that could transform their lives. Governments feared losses that could damage prestige and finance. The treasure ship became more than a vessel. It was empire made visible, creaking across the sea and compass. To pirates, it represented the boldest possible target, even when reality made it hard to take. Pirates targeted slave ships, merchant vessels, fishing boats, and supply craft. Pirate targets were more varied than the legend suggests. A crew might seize a large merchant ship one month and a modest coastal craft the next. The choice depended on need, opportunity, risk, and location. A fishing boat might provide food or local knowledge. A supply craft might carry rope, water, canvas, or tools. A merchant vessel might hold cargo that could be sold. A slave ship could offer provisions, equipment, or human captives whose fate depended on the pirates involved. This variety reveals the practical nature of raiding. Pirates did not always wait for spectacular prizes. They took what helped them continue. Small captures could keep a voyage alive between larger successes. They also spread fear widely because almost any vessel might become vulnerable under the wrong conditions. The history is uncomfortable because it includes both survival and cruelty. Pirates moved through an economy built on many kinds of exploitation, and their targets reflected that world. The sea carried wealth, labor, suffering, and necessity together. Some pirates freed captives, while others participated in cruel trade. Pirate history cannot be made simple. Some crews released enslaved people or accepted escapees into their ranks. In certain cases, a pirate ship could become a path away from bondage. Yet other pirates sold captives, profited from slave ships, or treated people as cargo within the brutal economy of the Atlantic world. Both realities existed. This tension is important because it prevents the story from turning into either pure rebellion or pure villainy. Pirates were not one moral type. They were groups of people making choices inside violent systems, and those choices could differ sharply from crew to crew. A person captured at sea might meet unexpected mercy, calculated recruitment, ransom demands, theft, or exploitation. The outcome depended on circumstance, leadership, profit, prejudice, and need. That complexity is part of what makes pirate history so gripping and so disturbing. It contains moments that look like resistance, and moments that mirror the cruelty of the empire's pirates claimed to defy. Pirate history includes resistance, greed, survival, and exploitation. The real story refuses to fit into a single mood. Pirates challenged powerful systems, but they also preyed on vulnerable people. They created unusual rules among themselves, yet used fear against others. They sometimes offered harsh forms of fairness within their crews, while stealing from ships that carried ordinary sailors trying to make a living. Some sought freedom from brutal service. Some wanted wealth. Some were forced aboard and waited for escape. Others embraced violence because it worked. This mixture is why piracy remains so fascinating. It shows human beings under pressure, outside normal law, building their own order, and revealing their own contradictions. The pirate ship could be a workplace, a weapon, a refuge, and a threat. It could carry democratic impulses in one direction and cruelty in another. To understand pirates honestly, we have to hold those truths together. The legend gives us adventure. The history gives us something deeper, a world where desperation and ambition met on the water. Archaeologists have identified shipwrecks linked to famous pirates. For a long time, pirate history depended heavily on trial records, government papers, newspapers, and stories shaped by enemies or admirers. Shipwreck archaeology adds another kind of evidence. A wreck can reveal how a vessel was built, armed, repaired, and used. It can show whether written accounts exaggerate or miss important details. When archaeologists connect a wreck to a famous pirate, the legend becomes physical. Iron cannon, anchors, fastenings, ballast, bottles, ceramics, and personal objects all become clues. They sit on the seabed after centuries of silence, waiting to be read. The work is difficult because storms, currents, salvage, and time scatter evidence. Identification requires careful comparison rather than wishful thinking. Yet the reward is extraordinary. A pirate ship stops being only a name in a story. It becomes wood, metal, weight, and design. Archaeology brings the pirate world back from myth by showing the ordinary materials that carried extraordinary lives across dangerous water. The wreck of Queen Anne's Revenge revealed Blackbeard's flagship. A shipwreck found off North Carolina has been widely identified as the remains of Queen Anne's Revenge, the vessel associated with Blackbeard at the height of his power. Before becoming his flagship, the ship had been a French slave vessel. Blackbeard captured and refitted it, adding heavy armament that helped create his fearsome presence. The wreck site has yielded cannon, anchors, medical equipment, navigational items, and many fragments of shipboard life. These finds matter because they connect one of piracy's most famous figures to physical evidence. They also remind us that pirate ships often had earlier lives in legitimate or cruel trades before being transformed by capture. The vessel did not survive long in Blackbeard's hands, but its reputation endured for centuries. Archaeology gives that reputation texture. It shows not just the dramatic captain, but the machinery around him. A flagship was a working space filled with tools, weapons, repairs, and human traces. Beneath the water, the legend became an artifact field. Pirate archaeology often finds tools, weapons, plates, and ordinary belongings. The most revealing finds are not always gold. Archaeologists studying pirate-related wrecks often recover objects from daily life. A cooking pot, a pewter plate, a clay pipe, a buckle, a cannonball, or a carpenter's tool can tell a quieter story than treasure ever could. These items show how people ate, worked, repaired, fought, and passed time. They help reconstruct the ship as a living environment rather than a floating symbol. Weapons reveal preparation for violence, but tools reveal maintenance and labor. Tableware hints at meals shared in cramped spaces. Personal objects suggest individuals inside the larger legend. Such finds can also show the mixed origins of cargo and equipment. A pirate vessel was often assembled from captured pieces, reused materials, and practical improvisation. This makes each artifact part of a larger puzzle. This kind of work has to be done carefully and respectfully because these were real people, not props from legend. The findings can cut through romance. This kind of work has to be done carefully and respectfully because these were real people, not props from legend. The findings can cut through romance. The pirate world we picture today owes a great deal to fiction. Adventure novels, stage plays, illustrations, and later films transformed scattered historical details into a recognizable style. Writers amplified certain features because they made better stories. Buried treasure, secret maps, dramatic villains, loyal crews, island hideouts, and distinctive costumes became part of the standard imagination. Some of these ideas had roots in reality. Others were rare, exaggerated, or invented. Fiction did not merely repeat pirate history. It organized it into a dream the public could. A messy world of labor, law, hunger, trade, and violence became a stage for adventure. That transformation is powerful because it still shapes expectations. Many people meet pirates first through stories, then later discover the real history underneath. The myth is not useless. It shows what generations found exciting or frightening about piracy. But it can hide the harder truths. Novels gave pirates their glow. History gives them their weight. Real pirates were stranger, harsher, and more organized than legend suggests. The deeper you look, the more surprising the subject becomes. Real pirates were not simply swaggering figures from adventure stories. They built rules, negotiated shares, gathered intelligence, repaired ships, managed supplies, and navigated political gray zones. Their world could be brutally violent, but it also required planning and cooperation. They frightened governments because they were not random criminals drifting without structure. They threatened trade by understanding it. They survived by exploiting gaps in empire, geography, weather, and law. At the same time, their lives were often miserable. Disease, hunger, injury, betrayal, capture, and execution were constant possibilities. The legend gives us a cleaner picture, full of symbols that are easy to enjoy. The truth is more gripping because it is less tidy. Pirates were workers, predators, rebels, opportunists, victims, and organizers all at once. They lived in a dangerous space between freedom and ruin. That is why their history still holds us. The myth is exciting, but the reality is far more astonishing. And so, we leave the world of pirates behind for tonight. We have followed them across trade routes and hidden harbors. We have seen how their ships were not only places of danger, but places of rules, bargains, skill, and survival. We have looked past the legends of buried treasure and wooden planks and found something stranger beneath them. A world of sailors, storms, flags, trials, shipwrecks, and uneasy choices. The real history of piracy is darker than the stories, but also more surprising. It belongs to crowded decks under heavy sail, to distant ports where rumors traveled faster than maps, to narrow coastlines where a single light could mean safety, danger, or deception, and to lives shaped by hunger, courage, greed, and the endless pull of the sea. But now, that restless world can begin to drift away. Let the ships grow smaller in your mind. Let the canvas soften into the distance. Let the last lanterns along the harbor fade one by one until only the rhythm of the water remains. There is nothing more you need to follow now. Your work for the day is done. Your thoughts can loosen their grip. Your shoulders can settle. Your breathing can become slow and easy. If you enjoyed this journey, you are always welcome to like, subscribe, or leave a thought below. It helps others find their way here, too. And if you happen to still be awake, there will be another sleepy history journey waiting for you on the screen. But for now, let the ocean grow calm. Let the night gather softly around you. And allow this old world of sails and shadows to carry you gently toward rest. Sleep well and good night.